The sound of a slap echoed through the cabin. Gasps filled the air as passengers froze in disbelief. The flight attendant's hand was suspended in mid-air, her face twisted with rage. Across from her, the black woman touched her reddening cheek, her eyes not showing fear or anger, but something far more dangerous: calm calculation. This wasn't just an assault. It was a career-ending mistake when the flight attendant realized she had just slapped the one person who controlled her entire future. She had no idea that the woman she just humiliated owned not just a seat on this plane, but the entire airline. As we continue this story, if you stand against prejudice and believe everyone should be treated fairly, click the subscribe button now and comment justice. Only those who support prejudice and racism won't subscribe. Denise Washington woke up at 5 a.m. that morning, just like any other business day. 53 years old, with eyes that held both warmth and unwavering determination. 20 years ago, she was working triple shifts. Today, her net worth exceeded 9 figures. Not that you could tell by looking at her. She chose comfort for the Atlanta to Chicago flight. Designer jeans that looked ordinary unless you noticed the subtle stitching, a casual jacket without any visible logos, and a handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. No flashy jewelry, no entourage. Just Denise and her quiet confidence. "Good morning, Miss Washington," the hotel doorman said with genuine respect as she stepped into her waiting car. Her driver nodded toward her phone. "Big meeting in Chicago today?" "Just a routine board evaluation," Denise replied, scrolling through quarterly reports for Air National, the airline she had secretly acquired a controlling interest in 3 months ago. A fact known only to a select few executives. Meanwhile, across town at Atlanta International, Jessica Miller was starting her shift. 35 years old, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile she turned on and off like a light switch, depending on who stood before her. "I swear I had another one yesterday," Jessica laughed, sipping her premium coffee in the flight attendant's lounge. "Trying to board with a coach ticket during priority boarding. I mean, can't they read the signs?" Her colleagues chuckled as Jessica continued. "I just don't understand why they always act so entitled." In the gleaming terminal of Atlanta International, the morning light streamed through massive windows, illuminating the clear division of travelers. Some rushed with overstuffed bags, while others strolled unhurried with sleek luggage and priority tags. Jessica moved through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency, her demeanor shifting dramatically as she greeted different passengers. "Good morning, sir. So lovely to see you again," she beamed at an older white businessman, touching his arm familiarly. "Your usual seat is all ready for you." Moments later, her smile tightened as she nodded curtly to a young Asian family. "Boarding passes and passports, please." For the black businessman in an impeccable suit, she didn't smile at all. "Ticket." As the gate area filled, Denise Washington quietly observed it all from behind her laptop screen, taking mental notes of every interaction. Her eyes missed nothing. Had Jessica bothered to look closely, she might have noticed Denise's limited edition watch, or the way other airline staff occasionally glanced at her with nervous recognition. But Jessica saw only what she expected to see. "Now boarding our priority customers and those needing special assistance." The announcement echoed through the terminal as Jessica took her position at the gate, clipboard in hand, and practiced smile firmly in place. The business class line quickly formed with the usual suspects: executives in tailored suits, a celebrity trying to look inconspicuous beneath designer sunglasses, and frequent flyers who barely looked up from their phones. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson. Chicago again this week? Your usual scotch will be waiting after takeoff." Jessica's voice carried a warmth reserved for certain passengers. Her touch lingered on the arm of an older gentleman as she checked his boarding pass. Her laughter melodious at a joke that wasn't particularly funny. "Mrs. Whitfield, love those earrings. We have your lactose-free meal already confirmed." For each white passenger in the business class line, Jessica had a personal touch, a recognition, a moment of genuine seeming connection. She was good at her job when she wanted to be. Then Denise Washington stepped forward. Jessica's smile vanished so quickly it might never have existed. Her eyes flicked from Denise's casual attire to her boarding pass, then back to her face with unmistakable suspicion. Business class? The question itself was an accusation. Denise simply nodded, her expression neutral as she presented both her boarding pass and ID. Jessica studied the documents with exaggerated scrutiny, flipping the boarding pass over as if expecting to find evidence of forgery. "This is for priority boarding only," Jessica said, her tone suddenly formal and cold. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" Denise's voice remained steady. "Yes, I'm sure. Seat 3A." Jessica reluctantly scanned the boarding pass, the machine confirming what she already knew with an approving beep. Still, she hesitated before returning the documents, her mouth tight with unspoken judgment. "Very well. Down the jet bridge and to the left." No smile, no pleasantries. Just the bare minimum of professional obligation. As Denise moved past, Jessica turned to her colleague and whispered behind her hand, loud enough that those nearby could hear. How did she get a business class ticket? Probably using someone else's miles. The colleague giggled, glancing at Denise's retreating form. What Jessica failed to notice was Denise slightly slowing her pace, catching every word. Or the subtle way Denise's fingers moved across her phone screen, typing a note without even looking down. On board, Jessica's irritation only grew. Every time she passed through the business cabin, her eyes lingered on Denise. Watching her decline the champagne, observing her comfortable familiarity with the seat controls, noting the way she quietly worked on her laptop with the efficiency of someone accustomed to making every minute count. It clearly didn't fit Jessica's narrative. Each passing minute seemed to aggravate Jessica further. She offered warm towels to everyone in business class, except somehow missing Denise's row. She took meal orders from every passenger, before finally turning to Denise with a clipped, "And you?" Throughout it all, Denise remained composed, responding with simple courtesy and occasionally making notes on her phone. The more dignified Denise appeared, the more Jessica's frustration visibly mounted. When Denise pressed the call button to request a glass of water, Jessica took 4 minutes to respond, though she jumped to assist the white businessman across the aisle within seconds. "Is there a problem?" Jessica asked when she finally approached, her tone suggesting that the real problem was the audacity of Denise pressing the button at all. Denise Washington sipped water and gazed out the window as the plane reached cruising altitude. Her mind drifted back 30 years, to when she first entered the aviation industry. Denise had grown up in South Chicago, daughter of a postal worker and a nurse who worked night shifts. College was a patchwork of scholarships, loans, and shifts at a 24-hour diner. Her business degree came with $87,000 in student debt and a determination that could bend steel. Despite all these, she overcame all barriers to be who was today. Air National was her latest acquisition, quietly purchased through a network of holding companies. The board members knew her name, but few had met her in person. Only the CEO knew she would be flying incognito today, evaluating the customer experience firsthand. Back in the present, Jessica had gone from subtle slights to outright ignoring Denise during the beverage service. "Would you care for a drink?" Jessica asked the businessman beside Denise, then the woman across the aisle, her voice warm and attentive. When it was Denise's turn, Jessica simply reached over her to collect the empty cup from the passenger at the window seat, then moved on to the next row without a word. Denise pressed the call button again. Jessica saw it, made eye contact with Denise, then deliberately turned and walked to the galley. 3 minutes later, another flight attendant appeared. "Can I help you?" the young man asked. "I wasn't offered a beverage during the service," Denise explained calmly. "I'm so sorry about that. What can I get you?" "Just water. Thank you." When he returned with her water, Jessica watched from the galley, irritation plain on her face. She said something to another attendant who glanced at Denise, then quickly looked away, uncomfortable with whatever Jessica had shared. Throughout this treatment, Denise remained composed. It wasn't the first time she'd experienced such behavior, and likely wouldn't be the last. But unlike those earlier years when she had limited recourse, today was different. Today, she had the power to turn this moment into meaningful change. As Jessica continued her selective service through the cabin, she had no idea that her career wasn't just in jeopardy. It was already over. She was simply the last to know. If you were in Denise's shoes, would you have maintained your composure like Denise did in the face of such blatant discrimination, or would you have confronted Jessica immediately? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button now for more stories like this. 90 minutes into the flight, the tension in business class had become palpable. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every passenger received attentive service except for the black woman in seat 3A. When meal trays were collected, Jessica took everyone's except Denise's. When pillows were offered, everyone received one except Denise. When passengers asked questions, all received prompt answers except Denise. Denise Washington had spent decades in corporate America. She recognized the strategy. Make someone feel unwelcome through actions that were difficult to prove, then claim innocence when confronted. She'd endured it in boardrooms, at industry conferences. But today would be different. The breaking point came during the mid-flight refreshment service. Jessica made her way through the business cabin, offering fresh coffee and snacks with practiced efficiency and selective warmth. But when she reached Denise's row, she served the window seat passenger, then pivoted and continued down the aisle as if the middle seat were empty. Denise had documented 14 separate instances of being deliberately overlooked during the 3-hour flight. This made 15. She pressed her call button. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. Passengers around her exchanged glances, some beginning to recognize what was happening. An older gentleman across the aisle frowned in concern. A young woman 2 rows ahead watched the situation unfold, her discomfort visible. After 7 minutes, Jessica finally approached, her expression making clear that the call was an inconvenience rather than her job. "Excuse me," Denise said in the measured tone that had closed million-dollar deals. "I wasn't offered service during the refreshment pass." What happened next stunned the entire cabin. "You need to wait your turn like everyone else," Jessica said, her voice deliberately louder than necessary. "I'm serving all the passengers as quickly as I can." The businessman beside Denise looked up from his laptop, startled by the attendant's tone. Across the aisle, a woman paused her movie, removing her headphones to make sure she'd heard correctly. The cabin fell silent in that peculiar way that happens when everyone is suddenly, uncomfortably aware that a line has been crossed. Denise slowly stood up, maintaining eye contact with Jessica. At 5'6", Denise wasn't particularly tall, but the quiet dignity she carried made her presence fill the space between them. "I've been patient for the entire flight while you've deliberately ignored me," Denise said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm simply asking for the same service everyone else has received." Jessica's face flushed red, her eyes darting around at the passengers now openly watching. She felt cornered, exposed, her authority challenged in front of an audience. Something inside her snapped. "How dare you accuse me?" Jessica hissed. Then it happened. In a flash of blind rage and humiliation, Jessica's right hand swung up and across, connecting with Denise's left cheek with a crack that echoed through the hushed cabin. The slap hung in the air like suspended animation. A collective gasp rippled through business class. A woman covered her mouth in shock. The businessman beside Denise half rose from his seat, instinctively moving to intervene. Denise's head had barely moved with the impact. She stood perfectly still, a small red mark blooming on her cheekbone, her expression unchanged except for a slight narrowing of her eyes. For 3 excruciating seconds, nobody moved. Even Jessica seemed frozen in horror at what she'd just done, her hand still partially raised, her eyes wide with the sudden realization of her actions. Then, with the same measured calm she'd maintained throughout, Denise raised her hand. Not to retaliate, but to gently touch the spot where Jessica's palm had connected with her face. The silence that followed the slap was deafening. Denise didn't raise her voice. She didn't match Jessica's hostility or retaliate against the physical assault. Instead, she maintained a calm demeanor. "I would like your employee number, please," she said, her voice steady, despite the throbbing pain in her cheek and the humiliation of being struck like a child in front of a cabin full of strangers. Jessica's expression shifted from shock at her own actions to defiant mockery, a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. Her hand trembled slightly as she touched her name badge with exaggerated slowness. "It's right here. Jessica Miller. Employee number 87542. Sure, good luck with that complaint." The dismissive tone made her meaning clear. Complaints from people like Denise went nowhere. But her voice lacked its earlier confidence, and beads of sweat had formed along her hairline as the reality of what she'd just done began to sink in. "Thank you," Denise replied, typing the information into her phone. "And your supervisor's name?" Something in Denise's quiet confidence finally registered with Jessica. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the armor of privilege that had protected her throughout her career. "Sarah Winters. You can't do anything to me. Your kind don't matter here." The statement dripped with confidence. "We'll see about that," Denise replied. 15 minutes later, Jessica was in the galley, hands still shaking as she regaled two colleagues with her version of events. "I had to put someone back in their place today," she said, reaching for a water bottle, spilling some as she poured. "She was acting entitled, demanding special treatment. She got in my face, and I just reacted." Her voice had a strange, brittle quality to it, part defiance, part growing fear. Deep down, Jessica knew she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She'd never physically touched a passenger before, let alone slapped one. But admitting the gravity of her actions would mean acknowledging she'd likely destroyed her career in a moment of blind rage. One colleague nodded along, but the other looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Maybe she was just asking for the same service everyone else got," the second colleague suggested carefully. Jessica's expression hardened. "Trust me, I know the type. Always looking for something to complain about, always playing the victim. Well, not on my flight." Do you think Jessica was right to slap Denise for demanding to be treated right? Tell us in the comments and hit the subscribe button now. 20 minutes after the slap that stunned business class, Sarah Winters, the lead flight attendant, was in the rear galley checking her crew messages when her tablet chimed with a priority alert. Her eyes widened as she read the message from airline headquarters, then read it again to make sure she'd understood correctly. The timestamp showed the message had been sent mere minutes after the incident. She quickly made her way to the forward cabin, her face carefully composed, but her pulse racing. Jessica was arranging the drink cart, still visibly flustered, but trying to project normalcy after her shocking loss of control. "Jessica, can I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah's tone was professional but urgent. In the privacy of the forward galley, Sarah kept her voice low. "I just received a priority message from corporate headquarters about the passenger in 3A. Jessica's face paled slightly, but defensive anger quickly replaced fear. She was aggressive and confrontational. "I had to." Sarah cut her off, something she'd never done in all their years flying together. "Stop talking. I need you to listen very carefully." Sarah glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "The passenger in 3A needs special attention for the remainder of the flight. Executive-level attention." Jessica's forehead creased in confusion. "What are you talking about? She's just some entitled." "Jessica." Sarah's voice was steel now. "This comes directly from the Chief Operating Officer's office. I don't know who she is, but someone at the highest level of the company is watching this flight. Several passengers have already filed complaints about the incident. Corporate is aware." The color drained from Jessica's face as the implications sank in. "But how did they?" "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that you need to provide impeccable service to her for the remainder of this flight. Your job depends on it. Do you understand?" Jessica nodded mechanically, her earlier bravado evaporating as reality began to dawn on her. Behind the fear in her eyes, questions multiplied. Who was this woman she just slapped? How had corporate found out so quickly? Why was headquarters personally monitoring this particular passenger? When Jessica returned to the cabin, she moved through the aisle like a different person. Gone was the smug confidence, replaced by the rigid movements of someone trying to hide rising panic. She approached Denise's seat, hands trembling slightly as she forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Miss Washington, can I offer you a fresh drink? Perhaps some wine or champagne?" The sudden change in Jessica's demeanor wasn't lost on nearby passengers, who exchanged curious glances. The woman who had been recording earlier raised her eyebrows, continuing to document the dramatic shift. "Water is fine, thank you," Denise replied with the same calm dignity she'd maintained throughout the flight, the red mark from Jessica's slap still visible on her cheekbone. Jessica hurriedly poured the water, spilling some on the tray table in her nervousness. "I'll get that," she said, frantically dabbing at the spill. "And would you care for anything to eat? We have some special items not on the menu that I could prepare for you." The insincerity was palpable. Jessica's smile never reached her eyes, which darted anxiously around the cabin as she performed this service theater. "No, thank you," Denise replied, making another note on her phone. As Jessica retreated to the galley, more strange things began to happen. The co-pilot emerged from the cockpit and walked directly to Denise's seat. "Miss Washington, the captain wanted to personally apologize for any inconvenience during your flight today. Is there anything we can do to make your journey more comfortable?" Jessica watched from the galley, her confusion mounting as other flight attendants who had barely acknowledged Denise earlier now approached her with offers of pillows, blankets, magazines, and headphones. Even more baffling was the arrival of Greg Thornton, the airline's most senior flight attendant, who had been working in first class. He bent down beside Denise's seat, engaged in what appeared to be an apologetic conversation, occasionally glancing back toward Jessica with undisguised concern. Throughout it all, Denise remained calm and gracious, accepting the newfound attention with simple courtesy while continuing to make occasional notes on her phone. The red mark on her cheek had begun to fade, but the memory of the slap remained vivid in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. In the rear galley, Jessica cornered a colleague. "What is happening? Who is she?" Jessica demanded, her voice a desperate whisper. "You don't know?" the colleague replied, eyes wide with disbelief. "They say she's—" Before he could finish, Sarah appeared, pulling him away with a sharp look. "Jessica, focus on your service. That's all you need to worry about right now." But Jessica's mind was racing. The special treatment, the urgency from headquarters, the captain's personal apology. The pieces were beginning to form a picture that made her stomach drop. She reached for her phone, frantically searching Denise Washington Aviation Industry as her hands shook. The results loaded slowly with the plane's weak Wi-Fi, but when they did, Jessica nearly dropped her phone. There on her screen was a corporate profile of Denise Washington, the same woman she had slapped 20 minutes earlier, speaking at an industry conference. The caption identified her as one of the most influential figures in American aviation. Jessica's legs nearly gave out as a flight attendant passed by, whispering, "I heard she owns significant stock in our airline." What Jessica couldn't see was that Denise had just received a text message from the airline CEO. "Miss Washington, I've been informed of the incident. The situation will be addressed immediately upon landing. On behalf of the entire company, I offer my deepest apologies." Denise read the message, then continued writing her notes. Not a complaint, but a comprehensive assessment of systemic issues within the airline service culture that had allowed someone like Jessica to flourish. The notes detailed not just today's discrimination, but the organizational failures that had created the environment where such behavior could exist. As the plane began its initial descent into Chicago, Jessica watched Denise from the galley, the terrible truth slowly crystallizing. She hadn't just slapped a passenger. She had slapped someone with the power to end not just her career, but potentially transform the entire airline. As the plane touched down at Chicago O'Hare, Jessica's mind raced through possible explanations, excuses, and defenses. Maybe it wasn't as bad as she thought. Maybe the passenger was important, but not that important. Maybe the slap hadn't been caught on camera. Maybe she could salvage her career with the right apology. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers gathered their belongings. Jessica mechanically assisted, her practiced smile now a hollow mask concealing mounting dread. "Miller, you're needed at the gate immediately after deplaning," Sarah whispered as they opened the cabin doors. "Regional Director Monroe is waiting." Jessica's stomach dropped. Regional directors didn't meet flights unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. As the last passenger exited, Jessica made her way up the jet bridge on unsteady legs. Through the gate area windows, she could see a small group of people in corporate attire waiting in the adjacent conference room. Her breathing quickened as she recognized not just Regional Director Monroe, but Vice President of Operations Kingsley. And sitting calmly at the head of the table was Denise Washington. Jessica froze mid-step. Through the glass walls, she watched as everyone in the room deferred to Denise, who was speaking with quiet authority. Papers were spread before her. Papers that looked suspiciously like Jessica's personnel file. A gate agent approached. "Miss Miller, they're ready for you now." The conference room fell silent as Jessica entered. 6 pairs of eyes turned to her. But she could focus only on Denise Washington, still wearing the same casual clothes from the flight, the faint mark from Jessica's slap still visible on her cheek. Regional Director Monroe spoke first. "Miss Miller, do you know who you assaulted today?" Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came. "Allow me to introduce Denise Washington, majority shareholder of Air National and newly appointed chairperson of our board of directors." The room spun slightly as Jessica gripped the back of a chair for support. "Miss Washington acquired controlling interest in our airline 3 months ago," Monroe continued. "Today she was conducting an undercover assessment of our customer experience, something she personally does with every airline she acquires." VP Kingsley slid a tablet toward Jessica. "We've received 17 passenger statements about today's incident, plus 4 videos showing you deliberately denying service to Ms. Washington and ultimately physically assaulting her." With trembling fingers, Jessica pressed play. There she was, in high definition, her hand connecting with Denise's face, while business class passengers gasped in shock. The footage was damning, undeniable. I didn't know who she was." Denise Washington finally spoke, her voice as measured as it had been on the plane. "Does it matter who I am, Miss Miller? Would it have been acceptable to treat any passenger the way you treated me today?" Jessica fumbled for words. "I didn't mean to. It was a stressful flight, and Denise held up a hand, silencing Jessica's stammering. "Before today, I was assessing operational efficiency, on-time performance, and customer satisfaction. But it seems we have a more fundamental problem to address." She picked up a folder. "Your personnel file shows 7 previous complaints of discriminatory treatment toward passengers of color. Each was dismissed because you claimed they were difficult customers. Each time, management accepted your version of events without further investigation." Denise tapped the file. "This isn't just about you, Ms. Miller. This is about a systemic failure that allowed your behavior to continue unchecked. Your actions today were merely the most visible symptom of a much deeper problem." Jessica's last desperate defense crumbled. "It was just one mistake. Everyone deserves a second chance." "This wasn't one mistake," Denise replied evenly. "This was your 8th documented incident of racial bias, but your first time encountering a passenger with the power to hold you accountable." VP Kingsley cleared his throat. "Miss Miller, effective immediately, your employment with Air National is terminated for violation of company policies regarding passenger dignity, professional conduct, and physical contact." You're also under arrest for assaulting the airline's director." Jessica was then escorted out of the meeting by the police. 1 month later, the Chicago headquarters of Air National hummed with activity. In the main training center, 60 flight attendants watched attentively as a new training video played. The title appeared on screen: "Service Excellence Beyond Bias." Behind the scenes, Denise Washington reviewed the comprehensive changes already implemented across the airline. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all customer-facing staff. A new reporting system allowing employees to flag discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. Body cameras for flight attendants, initially controversial but ultimately embraced, as protection for both staff and passengers. A complete overhaul of the complaint investigation process, now overseen by an independent review board. Leadership diversity initiatives that had already increased minority representation in management by 18%. Marcus Johnson, the newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer, presented the early results. Customer satisfaction scores among minority passengers have increased 23% in just 4 weeks, he reported. Employee morale is up across all demographics. The new anonymous reporting system has already identified 3 service managers with patterns of biased behavior who are now in remedial training. Denise nodded, making notes. And the passenger refund data? Down 17%. Fewer complaints means fewer compensatory vouchers issued. Denise smiled. So doing the right thing is also financially sound. Make sure the board presentation emphasizes that point. 2 weeks later, Denise Washington boarded an Air National flight from Chicago to Atlanta. This time, there was no disguise, no test. She was traveling as herself. The difference was immediately apparent. Not in the way she was treated. The crew was professional and attentive. But in the way every passenger received the same level of service, the same respect, the same dignity. In just 6 weeks, the culture had begun to shift. Not because one flight attendant had been fired, but because one leader had experienced discrimination firsthand and used her power to create meaningful change. The transformation wasn't perfect or complete. Deep-rooted biases don't disappear overnight. But for the first time, accountability existed at every level of the organization. As for Jessica Miller, her termination had become a cautionary tale in the industry. Did you enjoy this story? Like, subscribe, and share to others so they can learn too. Our next story is one you shouldn't miss.